part 2, and we're back, and we've just done mugs. Yeah, they're wonderful things. If you can find a nice Newcastle silver mug or tankard, they are one of the most glorious, to my mind, one of the most glorious bits of provincial silver. The whole thing is hand raised. There's no machine production with any of this stuff. It's all done by skill, by eye, and they're just lovely. They're lovely tactile things. So if you can find one of these, I genuinely believe they are not expensive for what they are. So if you can find one, buy one, if you can afford it. If you can't, there's lots of flatware from Newcastle. Now, funnily enough, the flatware of 2 of the provincial centres, Exeter and Newcastle, share a feature. They're both big centres for its production, and they both love to bright cut engrave their flatware. So from about 1770, when the harder steels come in that allow you to carve the surface of a piece of silver and leave it bright and shining and do all sorts of intricate designs on it, both at Exeter and in Newcastle, lots of things are bright cut engraved. I've got 2 pairs of, this isn't about sugar tongs, but just to show you, 2 pairs of sugar tongs. They're both Newcastle, and you both get an idea from them of how decorated the surface is, and they're both in lovely condition, so they're both bright. I have these because they're by rarer and more unusual makers. This lovely bright cut pair is by a man called John Mitchison, and his work is rarer. You will still see things like sugar baskets and salt cellars and things by Mitchison, and little cream jugs perhaps, but his later flatware will turn up, and it's beautifully done. These are slightly earlier, and these are by very good, there is a family of silversmiths called Crawford. These are by David Crawford, and he made, I think, some of the most beautiful Newcastle silver sugar tongs that you can find. They've always got lots of decoration. Look at the bowl. Can you see the little flower and leaves? No, that's the sort of detail. They're fabulous things and absolutely mint and perfect. Prices for sugar tongs, really accessible. Langlands are the big firm. John Langlands the first, John Langlands the second, Langlands and Robertson, Dorothy Langlands, lots of Langlands. Those, in a similar style to this, can be £30–40 if you see them on eBay or in a centre. Sometimes, if they're really decorative and beautiful condition, they can be more. They only become expensive, or relatively expensive. They're not expensive for the amount of work and the age of them and the rarity, but they become relatively expensive when they're rarer makers. So the Mitchison pair might be as much as £100–120 at an antiques fair. The Crawford pair, quite rare to find in pristine condition. They might be £150 or more from a specialist. So that's the sort of thing that you can look for, but well worth it. I think probably, unless you find a really beautiful Langlands pair, probably better to buy the rarer ones. So throughout the 18th century, Newcastle silver's being churned out. It is slightly rarer for flatware from pre-1750 to turn up. I'm going to show you an example of teaspoons. Now, you can go out and you can find late 18th, early 19th century Newcastle teaspoons in average condition quite easily. I'd always suggest buying the best, particularly when they're bright cut engraved, buying the best ones you can afford, because the condition with those really is everything. These are Hanoverian pattern, and these date to around 1730, 1740. Now, this may surprise you, but I think they're probably one of the only sets of Hanoverian pattern Newcastle teaspoons for sale in the country, because they are that rare, of this pattern, of this earlier pattern. They've got that lovely feature again. I hope you can see it. Not terribly well. I'll put pictures up. Lots of decoration as well, flowers, shells and scrolls, all flat chased on them. Again, You know, they didn't like plain surfaces on their flatware. Crested. Now, I did say in the first video, very rarely is Newcastle silver crested, and it's true, but when it is crested, you can often find out who it was for. And whilst I have traced it, I'm not clever enough to remember it, so I had to write it down on a piece of paper to tell you. But they're for Sir John Swinburne, who was the 3rd Baronet of, what does that say? Cape Heaton Hall, Northumberland. So it's always special when you can pin a piece of silver down to the person that ordered it and first owned it. And thankfully they haven't been erased and re-engraved, which happens to a substantial amount of this stuff. The really interesting thing about these, though, is they are made by 2 different Newcastle silversmiths. One set, or a set of 5, are by John Kirkup. And his father, James, had an apprentice who set up as a silversmith himself, who was called William Partis. And the other 3 are made by William Partis. So it's likely that these were originally ordered from Partis, and then slightly later, John Kirkup picked up the business and made the others. So it wouldn't have been a 3 and a 5 originally. It would have been a set of 12 and then another set of 12. But they all get mixed up together and given to different relatives, and you know, that's just the way family division works. But they're rare things. Again, all hand-raised. Hanoverian pattern Newcastle spoons are rare. Old English and fiddle pattern spoons from Newcastle survive by the ton, which is fabulous if you're a collector, because you can go and find lots and lots of different examples. Newcastle silver keeps being made throughout the 19th century until the Assay Office closes in 1883. And that also offers an appeal to collectors. It wasn't like Chester that kept going into the 20th century and churned out you get a lot of later stuff from Chester. So perhaps the mark in that respect isn't as special or doesn't have that feeling of rarity. But with Newcastle silver, 1883, it all stops. So there's a cachet to that as well. Go out and have a look for it. There's all sorts of things that you can find. Again, look for clear marks, look for condition. At the end of the life of the Newcastle Assay Office, there were some fantastic Victorian cased sets of flatware, and all different forms come in there, of course. So sugar sifters, cream ladles, 3-piece sets for the service of tea and sugar, and caddy spoons. There were lots of wine labels as well. They survive in quite large numbers. There's all these entry points for collecting Newcastle silver. And the lovely thing about it, and why I've started with it is not difficult to find pieces either from the 19th or the 18th century. And as you get into it, you will begin to realise, as every collector does when they go into an area, then there are some things that are really rare. So 17th century Newcastle silver is really rare, and large monumental pieces of 18th century silver, like punch bowls and enormous sauce boats and candlesticks, they are really rare. But there are different things, and flatware, as I say, is produced in abundance from about 1760 all the way up to the end of the Assay Office. That's over 120 years of collecting that you can do. And of course there is the ubiquitous sugar tongue. Where would we be without the sugar tongue in terms of collecting? Nowhere, I hear you say. So that's it for this week. I've galloped through it. I've left a book out of this, but we'll get back to it. We might even pick up next week and do a bit more on Newcastle. I don't know. We can spin this out until Christmas. Don't you worry. But we will get on then. After we've fully done that, we'll have a look at Chester. May not have many examples for that because it's in one respect bloody rare. Exeter And then when we get to York, somebody might just have to gag me to stop me talking about York Silver. Might go on for a month. But that's it for now. Hope you've enjoyed these two not so short films. Oh my God, it'll take me all morning to upload these. And good antiques hunting, and goodbye.